Welcome back to the deep dive, your ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed without getting buried under, a mountain of research. Today, we're plunging headfirst into a topic that underpins virtually all digital security, cryptography and symmetric key algorithms. We're drawing directly from the insights of CISSP, that's the Certified Information Systems Security Professional, specifically diving into Chapter 6. Our mission: to unpack the fundamental principles that secure our digital lives, to truly understand the language of encryption, and to explore how these incredibly powerful tools protect our most sensitive data in an increasingly connected and, let's face it, often vulnerable world. By the end of this deep dive, you're not just going to know what these concepts are, but why they matter. We've packed it with some surprising facts and immediate real-world relevance. Let's get started. So let's kick things off with the most fundamental question. Why is cryptography, this whole idea of secret codes and hidden messages, why is it so absolutely essential in today's digital landscape? What core problems does it solve that we can't just, fix with good password policies?
That's the perfect place to begin, really, because it gets right to the heart of why cybersecurity is a necessity, not just, a nice to have. At its core, cryptography provides four essential security goals for any sensitive information. Think of them as like the four robust legs of a table holding up all secure communications. Those goals are confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation. Without these, honestly, our digital world would basically crumble.
Okay, four legs of the table. That sounds like the bedrock. Let's really break down each one. Starting with confidentiality, what exactly are we protecting, and I guess from whom, when we talk about keeping information confidential?
Right. Confidentiality, well, as the name suggests, it's all about ensuring that data remains private. Simple as that, really. It's like having a locked diary. Only you, or maybe someone you explicitly trust with the key, should be able to read its contents. But it's actually a bit more nuanced than just one state of protection. Data can exist in three distinct states, and each presents unique challenges for maintaining confidentiality.
Three states. That's interesting. My mind usually just lumps it all into data, full stop. Never really thought about it that way.
Yeah, most people don't. The first state is data at rest. This refers to data stored in a fixed location. So imagine your personal files on a hard drive, maybe a USB flash drive, or even like encrypted backups in cloud storage. The analogy here is kind of like a safe locked away in a vault. The primary risk to confidentiality for data at rest is often physical theft. Someone stealing the storage media itself, or maybe unauthorized access to the stored files through a compromised system. If someone physically walks away with that hard drive and the data isn't properly encrypted, well, your confidentiality is completely gone.
Okay, so if it's just sitting there, it's at rest. Makes sense. What about when it's moving from one place to another, like email or browsing?
Exactly. That brings us to data in transit. It's often referred to as data on the wire because it's actively moving across a network. This is data being transmitted from one point to another. Think about sending an email, browsing a secure website, or information traveling across your corporate network, or just the internet itself. My analogy for this is like a sealed, armored truck transporting valuables. The main risk here is eavesdropping or interception. Basically, an unauthorized party intercepts and reads your communication as it travels. Encryption is absolutely critical here because even if it is intercepted, the data remains unreadable without the proper key.
Right, the encryption makes it useless to the eavesdropper. And the third state. My mind immediately goes to, well, when I'm actually using the data, does cryptography still matter then?
You're spot on. The third state is data in use. This is data that's loaded into the active memory of a computer, like an open document you're currently working on, or the contents of your computer's random access memory, RAM. Imagine your confidential notes spread out on your desk while you're actively thinking about them, shuffling them around. While you're interacting with this data, it's vulnerable. Unauthorized processes could try to access that memory, or maybe even malicious software operating within your system. Cryptography aims to protect data in all three of these states, ensuring privacy throughout its entire life cycle. And it's maybe worth briefly mentioning here, Symmetric Cryptosystems, which we're focusing on today, use a shared secret key. Asymmetric systems, which we'll get to later, use individual public-private keys. They offer different capabilities.
That makes a lot of sense, covering all the bases, the whole life cycle. Okay, so confidentiality is about ensuring privacy. But what about integrity? How does crypto guarantee that my data hasn't been, messed with, even if it's not secret anymore?
Integrity. Yeah, this ensures that data has not been altered without authorization. Think of it like a tamper-evident seal on a package. If that seal is broken, you immediately know it's been tampered with, right?
Yeah.
And you probably shouldn't trust what's inside. In the digital world, cryptography helps enforce this using things called message digests or digital signatures. These are essentially unique, fixed-size fingerprints of the data. If even a single bit in the message changes, whether accidentally or maliciously, the resulting message digest or digital signature will also change, usually dramatically. This immediately alerts the recipient that the data's integrity has been compromised somewhere between creation and reception, so they can reject the untrustworthy info.
So it's not just keeping it secret, but ensuring it's the original secret, untainted. Got it. And what about verifying who's who? That brings us to authentication, right? How does crypto help prove you are who you say you are?
Yes, authentication. This is all about verifying the claimed identity of system users or, other entities like servers. My favorite analogy here is maybe a secret handshake or a unique password you need to get into an exclusive club. Cryptography provides really robust methods to prove someone is who they claim to be, often without revealing the actual secret itself. Take the challenge response authentication protocol they describe in the source using the classic Bob and Alice scenario. So Alice wants proof of Bob's identity. She sent Bob a challenge, maybe a random number or unique string. Bob then encrypts a specific piece of information known only to him and Alice along with Alice's challenge using their shared secret key. He sends this encrypted proof back to Alice. Alice then decrypts it with their shared secret key and checks if the response matches what she expected given her challenge. If it matches, she trusts Bob is really Bob. It's a clever way to verify identity without actually sending the shared secret across the network where it could be intercepted.
That is clever. It's like proving you have the key without ever showing the key to someone who might, steal it. Okay, and finally, non-repudiation. That sounds like a fancy word for you can't deny you sent it.
Precisely. Non-repudiation provides undeniable assurance to the recipient that a message originated from a specific sender and that the sender cannot later deny having sent it. The best analogy here is probably a signed receipt or maybe a notarized document. Once you sign it, you can't really claim you didn't. Right. Now, this is where symmetric and asymmetric key systems really diverge. Symmetric key systems, because they rely on a shared key that both parties have, generally don't offer non-repudiation. Since both Alice and Bob have the same key, Alice can't definitively prove Bob sent a message versus, herself creating it.
Right, because either of them could have made it with the shared key?
It's exactly. However, asymmetric systems can provide non-repudiation. This is because a unique private key is used by the sender to digitally sign the message. Only that specific sender possesses that private key. This links the message directly and cryptographically to the sender in a way that can be independently verified. It often forms the legal backbone for things like digital contracts and transactions, providing that undeniable proof of origin.
Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a solid grasp on why cryptography is so vital, providing that bedrock of confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation. Now, let's really peel back the layers. Let's understand the fundamental concepts and maybe even some of the underlying math that makes it all work, because that's where the real ingenuity lies, I think.
Absolutely. To truly understand how these systems function, we need to get a handle on a few fundamental terms. First, there's plaintext, often shown as P. This is just your original readable message. Think of your secret note before you apply any code. Then you have ciphertext, represented by C. This is the encrypted, scrambled message, the gibberish you get after applying your code. The process of transforming plaintext into ciphertext is called encrypting.
And going back is decrypting.
Right. Transforming ciphertext back into plaintext is decrypting. And at the absolute heart of all this are the keys. They're indispensable for both encryption and decryption. They're the actual secret, the specific variable or piece of info that makes the cryptographic algorithm work its magic.
So the keys are everything. And I've heard the term key space thrown around. What exactly does that mean, and why is it so important for security? Is it just about how long the key is?
Key space is basically the range of all possible key values that an algorithm can use. Imagine it as all the possible combinations for a digital lock. The larger the key space, the exponentially more secure the algorithm is against what we call a brute force attack. That's where an attacker literally tries every single possible key until they stumble upon the right one. For instance, a 128-bit key has an astonishing 2 to the power of 128 possible values.
Which is a huge number, right?
It's a number so vast it's difficult to even visualize. It's roughly 3.4 followed by 38 zeros. This sheer magnitude of possible keys makes it computationally and just practically impossible for even the most powerful supercomputers today to try every single combination within any reasonable time frame. It's designed to defy even future computing power for hopefully decades.
That's truly mind-boggling. It makes me think about that old, dangerous idea, security through obscurity, where people try to hide how their system works to keep it safe. But that's not what we do in modern crypto, right? We don't rely on keeping the algorithm a secret.
No, absolutely not. In fact, that brings us directly to a foundational principle in cryptography established by August Kerckhoffs way back. Kerckhoffs' principle. It essentially states the enemy knows the system. The security of a crypto system should rely solely on the secrecy of the key, not on the secrecy of the algorithm itself. Think of it like a magician's trick. The audience shouldn't know the secret move, but the magic itself should still be impressive even if the method was revealed. The key is the secret, not the method. This directly contrasts with security through obscurity, which is just a dangerous practice. If the hidden method is ever discovered, the entire system immediately becomes vulnerable. Modern crypto systems are therefore subject to rigorous public review by experts worldwide. They scrutinize, test, and collectively harden algorithms, fostering trust. This transparency, which seems counterintuitive, is actually what makes them resilient.
So transparency in the algorithm, but absolute secrecy for the key.
Got it. What about the broader field? I've heard terms like cryptology, cryptanalysis.
Yeah.
Are they all just different words for the same thing? No, they're distinct but intimately related fields within the overarching study of secret communications. Cryptology is kind of the umbrella term. It encompasses both the creation and the breaking of codes. Within cryptology, we have cryptography, which is the art and science of creating secret codes and ciphers making communication secure. Then there's cryptanalysis, that's the study of methods to defeat those codes and ciphers, to break them. And finally, cryptosystems are the actual implementations of these cryptographic algorithms, the software or hardware that does the encryption and decryption. And for these cryptosystems, it's crucial to mention standards like FIPS 143. That's the Federal Information Processing Standard. It's a key U.S. government standard specifying security requirements for cryptographic modules, ensuring they're trustworthy.
This is all making more sense now, the different pieces. But you mentioned mathematics earlier. My brain immediately goes back to high school algebra. Is it like that? What kind of math is powering these incredibly complex algorithms beyond just massive numbers for keys?
It's not quite high school algebra, no. It's a foundational type of logical math that computers inherently understand. Boolean mathematics. This is the binary system, D's and ones. It's the very language of computer logic. Every operation a computer performs, from the simplest calculation to the most complex rendering, is ultimately expressed in these binary terms. Cryptography just leverages these fundamental logical operations at an incredibly rapid pace.
Okay, so it's the absolute building blocks of how computers think. What are the key logical operations involved, the ones that really matter for crypto?
We use several logical operations derived from Boolean math and cryptography. They're quite simple on their own, but powerful when combined. First, there's the AND operation. Think of it like needing both keys to open a strongbox. If both inputs are true or 1, the output is true. 1, otherwise it's false, 0. It's only true when all conditions are met.
Okay, both have to be true.
Right. Then the OR operation. This is more like needing either key to open a door. If at least one input is true, 1 input, the output is true. 1, only if both inputs are false, 0 are. Is the output false? 0. It's true if any condition is met.
Got it. One or the other, or both.
Exactly. Next, the NOT operation. This one's super simple. It just reverses the input value. If the input is 0, 1, the output is 1, the output is 0, 1, and the output, like a light switch turning off what was on and now what was off.
Flips the bit.
Precisely. These are the atomic operations computers perform billions of times a second to execute crypto functions.
And I've heard of exclusive OR or XOR being super important in crypto. What's so special about that one? It sounds like OR, but exclusive.
Exclusive OR, XOR. Yes, it's indeed the most commonly used logical function in cryptography for a very specific and elegant reason. It returns true, or 1, only if the inputs are different. If the inputs are the same, either both zeros or both ones, the output is false, 0 back. So 0 XOR 0, 0 is 1, 0 XOR 1 is 1, 1 XOR 1 goes back to zeros. My favorite analogy for XOR is a toggle switch. If you press it, the state changes, press it again, and it changes back to the original state. This unique reversible property makes it incredibly useful for simple encryption and decryption.
you XOR your plaintext with a key to get ciphertext. You can XOR that ciphertext with the exact same key again to get the original plaintext back.
Oh, wow. So the same operation encrypts and decrypts if you use the same key. That's neat.
Exactly. It's a mathematically elegant way to scramble and unscramble data very efficiently.
That makes perfect sense for encryption. Okay, what about the modulo function? I vaguely remember that from, like, elementary school math, finding remainders. How does that play into cryptography?
The modulo mod function is extremely important in cryptography, you're right. As you said, it's about finding the remainder after a division. Think of a clock face. After 12, it wraps around to 1, right? That's effectively performing a modulo 12 operation. So 13 mod 12 is 1, 14 mod 12 is 2. In cryptography, it's used extensively in various ciphers for wrapping around alphabets or numbers. It ensures results stay within a defined range, like the 26 letters of the alphabet, or a specific set of binary numbers. It's how ciphers like the Caesar cipher wrap Z's back around to C after a shift of 3.
Right, keeps things within bounds. Okay, and then there are one-way functions. These always sound a bit magical to me. What are they really, and why are they so foundational, especially for things like public key crypto?
One-way functions are mathematical operations that are relatively easy to compute in one direction, but are extremely difficult or practically impossible to reverse. My go-to analogy is breaking a glass. It's easy to smash it, right? But it's essentially impossible to put it back together perfectly, piece by piece. This property is absolutely crucial for modern cryptography, particularly for public key cryptography, like the RSA algorithm that's Rivest-Shamir-Adleman. RSA relies on the computational hardness of factoring extremely large prime numbers. You can easily multiply two huge prime numbers together to get an even larger number.
Multiplication is fast for computers.
Very fast. But trying to find those original two prime factors from their massive product, that's computationally infeasible for the very large numbers used in RSA. Cryptographers rely heavily on this mathematical asymmetry for the security of many systems, from secure web browsing, HTTPS, to digital signatures.
That's a great analogy for something so abstract. Okay, and what about a nonce? It sounds like a made-up word, honestly.
A nonce? Yeah, it does sound a bit funny. It's short for number used once, and it's precisely that. A random number generated for one-time use in a specific cryptographic operation. Think of it as a unique, unpredictable seed value that makes each encryption process slightly different, even if you're encrypting the exact same message with the exact same key multiple times. It's often used as an initialization vector, or FIO. That's a random bit string, usually the same length as the data block being encrypted. By combining the plaintext with a unique nonce, often using XOR before encryption, you ensure you get unique ciphertexts every single time.
Why is that so important, getting unique ciphertext?
It's critical because it prevents attackers from observing patterns. If the same plaintext encrypted with the same key always produced the exact same ciphertext, an attacker could build a dictionary of sorts and potentially crack the encryption. The nonce adds an essential layer of unpredictability and randomness.
So even if the message and key are identical, the nonce makes the resulting ciphertext unique each time. That's clever. Okay, and this next concept, zero-knowledge proof, sounds like something straight out of a spy movie. You can prove you know a secret without actually revealing the secret itself. How is that even possible?
It really does sound like that, doesn't it? But it's a real, powerful, and fascinating cryptographic concept with genuine real-world applications. The classic example, the one illustrated in our source material, is the magic door scenario. Imagine Peggy wants to prove to Victor that she knows the secret password to a magic door inside a cave, but she absolutely doesn't want to tell Victor the password. So Victor stands outside the cave entrance. Peggy goes into the cave. Inside there are two paths, say path A and path B, both leading to the magic door. Peggy randomly takes one path, uses the password to open the door, and then comes back out via the other path. Victor, watching from the entrance, can see which path she entered and which path she exited. If she consistently comes out the opposite path, after many tries, Victor becomes convinced she must know the password to open the door connecting the paths.
But she never actually said the password?
Exactly. She proved she knew it without revealing it. This has huge implications for authentication. It allows someone to verify their identity or privilege without ever transmitting their sensitive credentials, like a password, significantly reducing the risk of them being intercepted or compromised.
Yeah.
It's a fundamental building block for potentially much more secure future authentication systems.
That's incredible. Really clever stuff. And then split knowledge, which sounds related to dividing secrets.
Split knowledge is exactly that. It's about dividing information or privileges among multiple users so that no single person can compromise security on their own.
Think of it like a treasure chest that requires, say, 3 separate keys to open, and each key is held by a different person. No one person can open it alone. They have to cooperate. This is deeply related to the concept of key escrow, where an encryption key might itself be split into parts and held by different trusted entities. It's also linked to M of N control. This means that a minimum number, M out of a total number N of authorized agents, are required to perform some high-security task. For example, maybe needing 3 out of 8 designated agents to collectively unlock something critical. It's a powerful way to mitigate insider threats and prevent a single point of failure.
Right, spreading the trust, basically. And finally, a concept I've heard in the context of, like, how hard it is to break encryption, work function, or work factor. What does that mean for the average user or for someone choosing an encryption method?
The work function, or work factor, is a crucial measure in cryptography. It quantifies the effort usually in terms of monetary cost and/or time required for an attacker to defeat a cryptosystem, typically through a brute force attack, trying all keys. Essentially, it's asking, how much would it cost, or how long would it take, for an attacker with immense computing power to guess every possible key until they find the right one? The security and protection offered by a cryptosystem should always be proportional to the value of the asset it's protecting.
You wouldn't put a cheap padlock on a bank vault.
Exactly. You wouldn't put a flimsy lock on a diamond vault. Similarly, the work function needed to break an encryption should greatly exceed the time value and sensitivity of the asset it protects. For security professionals, understanding the work factor is key to making informed decisions. You have to balance the required security strength with the practical costs and effort needed to achieve it, always aiming to make sure your defenses are significantly more expensive to breach than the value of what's being protected.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. We've talked about the why, the goals, and the how in terms of foundations and math. Now let's look at the different ways messages are actually scrambled. The ciphers themselves, from, historical ingenuity to modern computational power.
Right. And to start, let's clarify the distinction between codes and ciphers, because people often use them interchangeably, but technically they're quite different. Codes work at the level of meaning. They replace entire words or phrases with symbols or other words. Think of the 10 system used in law enforcement, where 10 for 4 means message received and understood. It's like a secret dictionary where each word or common phrase gets a code word. Ciphers, on the other hand, work at the level of symbols themselves. They alter or rearrange individual characters or bits of a message. It's about scrambling the letters within a word, not replacing the whole word. Modern cryptography almost exclusively deals with ciphers.
That's a clear distinction. Codes replace, meaning ciphers scramble symbols. Okay, so if we're dealing with individual characters or bits, what are some of the basic cipher types that kind of laid the groundwork for modern encryption?
One of the oldest methods is the transposition cipher. This type of cipher simply rearranges the order of the plaintext characters to form the ciphertext. It's basically an anagram puzzle on a larger scale. For instance, if your message is hello, a simple transposition might just reverse it to allay. A more complex example, mentioned in our source, is the columnar transposition cipher. Imagine taking your plaintext message like, the fighters will strike the enemy bases at noon, and writing it out in a grid underneath a keyword, let's say attacker. You then read the columns out, but not left to right. You read them in an order determined by the alphabetical sequence of the letters in the keyword. So under A first, then the second A, then C, K, R, T, T.
So it shuffles the columns based on the keyword letters.
Exactly. It fundamentally shuffles the letters around, making the original message look like complete gibberish. While describing the exact output audibly is tricky.
TTWKMTA. or something like that. The core idea is this rearrangement. It creates significant diffusion, spreading the influence of plaintext letters across the ciphertext. The recipient, knowing the key word, could then reconstruct the grid and read it properly.
Wow, yeah, that sounds like a lot of manual work back in the day, but I can see how it scrambles the message effectively just by rearranging. What about substitution ciphers? That's what I usually think of when I hear a secret code, like replacing letters. You're right, substitution ciphers are perhaps the most intuitive. They replace each plaintext character with a different character according to some fixed system. A simple example is just shifting the alphabet. Replace A with D, B with E, and so on, like a basic decoder ring you might get in a cereal box. The most famous historical example is the Caesar cipher, allegedly used by Julius Caesar himself. It's also known as ROT3 because it typically involves shifting each letter by 3 positions forward in the alphabet.
ROT for rotate.
Exactly. Rotate by 3 positions. So
Yep.
A becomes D, B becomes E, and importantly, it wraps around using that modular arithmetic we talked about. X becomes A, Y becomes B, Z becomes C.
Can you give us a quick example of Caesar?
Sure. If your plaintext is the famous phrase, the die has been cast, applying the Caesar cipher, ROT3, would result in WKH, GLH, KDV, EHKOU, FDVW. Mathematically, you can represent this as C, P plus 3, mod 26, where C is the ciphertext letter's numerical value, P is the plaintext letter's value, A was 0, B 1, etc., and 26 is the number of letters in the English alphabet. The major weakness of the Caesar cipher, despite its historical fame, is that it's incredibly easy to break using frequency analysis.
Because some letters are used way more often than others.
Precisely. In any language, some letters appear far more often than others. In English, E is the most common, followed by T, A, O, I, etc. By analyzing the frequency of letters in the ciphertext, a cryptanalyst can quickly spot the shifted E, which would be H in ROT3, figure out the shift amount 3, and decode the entire message. It offers almost no real security against even basic analysis.
Okay, so if the simple Caesar cipher is so weak because of frequency analysis, how did cryptographers make substitution ciphers stronger? Did they just use more complex substitutions?
They did. To counter simple frequency analysis, they developed polyalphabetic substitution ciphers. These use multiple substitution alphabets within the same message, making it much harder to spot those frequency patterns. One of the most notable and historically significant is the Vigenère cipher. This cipher uses a keyword and a specific table, often called a Vigenère square or tabula recta. Each row in this table represents a different Caesar shift, from 0 to 25. Instead of one fixed shift like Caesar, the Vigenère cipher uses a keyword to determine which row of the table, to apply to each letter of the plaintext message, cycling through the keyword letters. So if your plaintext is, say, L, and the corresponding keyword letter is M, you find the L column and the M row in the table, and their intersection gives you the ciphertext letter, which is X.
So the key letter changes the substitution rule for each plaintext letter.
Exactly. If the next plaintext letter is A, and the next key letter is I, you use the I row and A column, getting I as the ciphertext. If the key is miles mile, and the plaintext is launch now, the ciphertext starts XI root TVA. The Vigenère cipher was considered unbreakable for centuries. They called it le chiffre indéchiffrable, the indecipherable cipher.
But it was eventually broken, right?
Yes, it was. It's vulnerable to what's called period analysis. Because the keyword usually repeats, like miles mile repeating, cryptanalysts realized they could figure out the length of the keyword. Once they knew the key length, say 5, they could treat the ciphertext as 5 separate simple substitution ciphers, all the first letters encrypted with the first key letter, all the 6 letters, etc., and apply frequency analysis to each subset. So while much stronger than Caesar, it wasn't truly unbreakable.
That's fascinating how they figured that out. But I've heard of ciphers that are supposedly truly unbreakable. Is that even theoretically possible, or is that just, Hollywood hype?
It is theoretically possible. This brings us to the legendary one-time pad, also known as the Vernam cipher. These are considered an extremely powerful type of substitution cipher, and they are, in fact, mathematically proven to be truly unbreakable if, and this is a huge if, 4 extremely strict requirements are met. 1, the key must be truly randomly generated. Not pseudo-random from a computer algorithm, but genuinely unpredictable randomness, like from atmospheric noise or radioactive decay.
Okay, truly random.
2, the key must be physically protected against disclosure. Absolutely secret. No copies, no digital traces.
Keep it super safe.
3, the tree must be used only once, ever. As soon as it's used for one message, encryption and decryption, it must be securely destroyed and never reused.
One time only, hence the name.
Exactly. And 4, critically, the key must be at least as long as the message itself. If your message is 1,000 characters long, your key must be 1,000 truly random characters long. Each character of the key encrypts exactly one character of the message, typically using XOR.
So if and only if all those incredibly strict conditions are met, it's genuinely unbreakable, even against, infinite computing power or future breakthroughs.
Yes, precisely. If those conditions are rigorously adhered to, there's no repeating pattern in the substitution, no statistical anomalies, nothing for cryptanalysts to grab onto. Any ciphertext character is equally likely to correspond to any plaintext character. It offers perfect secrecy. However, history gives us a powerful lesson here. During the Cold War, the Soviets used one-time pads for highly sensitive communications. This effort was monitored by Western intelligence in what became known as Project Venona. Cryptanalysts at the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, and its predecessors were actually able to break some of these supposedly unbreakable messages.
If the theory was perfect.
Not because the one-time pad algorithm itself was flawed, but because the Soviets, under pressure or through error, violated a core requirement. They reused some of the key pages.
They broke rule number 3.
They did. And that reuse, even partial, created subtle patterns that brilliant cryptanalysts were able to exploit over years of painstaking work, allowing them to decrypt portions of sensitive Soviet intelligence traffic. The Venona story vividly underscores that the strength of any crypto system isn't just in the mathematical theory, but in the rigorous, absolutely flawless adherence to its operational requirements, especially concerning key generation, distribution, and destruction. The practical challenges of generating, securely distributing, and then destroying such long, unique, random keys make the one-time pad impractical for most general-purpose encryption, especially bulk data.
That's a perfect example of theory versus practice. The how of implementation is just as critical as the what of the algorithm. Okay, so one-time pads, theoretically amazing, practically very difficult. What about running key ciphers? Are they related? Sometimes called book ciphers.
Yes, running key ciphers, or book ciphers, are somewhat related in concept to one-time pads because they also use a key that is as long as the message. However, instead of being truly randomly generated, the key is derived from some common pre-existing text, like a specific edition of a book, maybe a newspaper, or another text that both sender and receiver have access to. The fundamental problem here is that the randomness of the key is limited by the patterns inherent in the source text itself. Natural language isn't truly random. It has structure, common words, predictable sequences.
So it's not really random like a one-time pad key should be.
Exactly. If an attacker knows or can guess the book used, and maybe the starting point within the book, they can effectively reconstruct the key and break the cipher. It's far weaker and much less secure than a true one-time pad due to the inherent predictability and non-randomness of the key material.
Okay, that covers scrambling individual characters or words using different substitution and transposition methods. What about the modern ways computers handle data for encryption? Do they still do it character by character or in bigger chunks?
That's where the crucial distinction between block ciphers and stream ciphers comes into play in modern cryptography. Block ciphers operate on fixed-size chunks or blocks of data, typically 64 bits or, more commonly now, 128 bits at a time. Think of it like processing data in batches. You take a whole box of items, a block, apply the complex encryption process to that entire block, and then move on to the next box. Many modern strong encryption algorithms like AES, Advanced Encryption Standard, which we'll discuss shortly, are block ciphers.
Okay, chunks of data. What about stream ciphers?
Stream ciphers, on the other hand, operate on data one unit at a time, usually 1 bit or 1 byte character, processing the data as a continuous stream. The simple Caesar cipher is technically a stream cipher, as is the one-time pad. You encrypt each bit or byte as it comes. Each type has its advantages depending on the application. Stream ciphers can be faster and require less memory for certain applications, like real-time communication, voice, video, where data needs to be processed bit by bit with low latency. Block ciphers, however, are more common for encrypting stored data or large files, where you can process data in larger fixed blocks.
Right, different tools for different jobs. And finally, when we talk about designing strong cryptographic algorithms, especially block ciphers, I've heard 2 crucial terms mentioned: confusion and diffusion. What are those, and why are they so important for making an algorithm truly robust and hard to break?
These are 2 absolutely essential properties for any strong modern cryptographic algorithm, concepts originally proposed by Claude Shannon, the father of information theory. Confusion is about obscuring the relationship between the ciphertext and the key. It aims to make that relationship as complex and nonlinear as possible, so that even if an attacker gets hold of a lot of ciphertext, they can't deduce anything useful about the key. Think of it as making the handwriting in a coded message so incredibly messy and stylized that you can't possibly figure out the secret pen, the key, just by looking at the script, the ciphertext. Substitution operations are a primary way to achieve confusion.
Okay, hide the key's influence. What about diffusion?
Diffusion, on the other hand, is about spreading the influence of a single plaintext bit over many ciphertext bits. It ensures that changing just 1 bit in the original plaintext causes a cascade effect, changing roughly half of the bits in the resulting ciphertext block, seemingly at random. Imagine dropping a tiny pebble into a pond. Changing 1 bit, the pebble, creates ripples that spread out and affect the entire surface. Many ciphertext bits change. Transposition or permutation operations are excellent examples of how diffusion is achieved.
So they work together.
Yes. A strong cryptographic algorithm, especially a block cipher, uses both confusion and diffusion.
typically through multiple rounds of complex operations involving substitutions, permutations, and mixing with a key material. This combination makes cryptanalysis incredibly difficult and impractical, ensuring that even tiny changes to the input cascade into massive, unpredictable changes in the output, hiding any statistical patterns.
So what does this all mean for the encryption we use every single day? We've covered the fundamental concepts, the history, the underlying math. How do these ideas translate into the secure systems we rely on, when we browse the web or use our banking apps?
That's the crucial connection, right? How does all this theory become the lock icon in your browser? Modern crypto systems rely on these computationally complex algorithms and crucially long keys. And as we discussed with Kerckhoffs' principle, their security is often bolstered by being public and subject to rigorous review, allowing experts worldwide to try and break them, which paradoxically makes them stronger if they withstand that scrutiny. Let's look at some key symmetric encryption algorithms that have been or are currently in wide use. These are the workhorses. One of the most historic is the Data Encryption Standard, or DES. DES. It was the official U.S. government standard, established way back in 1975. DES is a 64-bit block cipher, meaning it processes data in 64-bit chunks and famously uses a 56-bit key. Internally, DES performs 16 rounds of complex operations, substitutions, permutations, XORing with parts of the key to encrypt the data block. It also has 5 standard modes of operation like ECB, CBC, CFB, OFB, CTR, which define how multiple blocks are chained together, but the core algorithm uses that 56-bit key.
Okay, DES, 1975, 64-bit blocks, 56-bit key. That 56-bit sounds pretty small by today's standards, especially after we talked about 128-bit keys having that astronomical number of possibilities. Is DES still considered secure at all?
You're absolutely right to be skeptical. That 56-bit key is DES's major crippling weakness today. With modern computing power, a 56-bit key is now easily breakable using brute force attacks. Specialized hardware was built years ago that could crack it in days, then hours, now potentially even minutes. Think of it like an old, robust-looking bank vault door from the 70s that was once considered state-of-the-art. But modern safe-cracking tools and knowledge can now defeat it relatively easily because technology has advanced so dramatically. DES was officially superseded by AES, the Advanced Encryption Standard, in 2001, precisely because its key length became demonstrably inadequate. However, understanding DES is crucial because it was the direct building block for its successor, triple DES.
Ah, right, triple DES or 3DS. 3DES, as the name suggests. I'm guessing it just uses DES 3 times to overcome that key length issue.
Exactly. 3DES is a much stronger adaptation that applies the DES algorithm 3 times in sequence, usually with 2 or 3 separate keys. The most common and secure implementation is called 3DECED3. That stands for Encrypt, Decrypt, Encrypt, using 3 distinct 56-bit keys, K1, K2, and K3. You first encrypt the plaintext block with K1, then you decrypt the result with K2, and then you encrypt that result again with K3.
Wait, why decrypt in the middle? That seems counterintuitive.
It does, but that decrypt-encrypt sequence is specifically designed to provide backward compatibility with single DES, if K1, K2, K3, and more importantly, to thwart a specific attack called the meet-in-the-middle attack. That attack made double DES, just encrypting twice with 2 keys. Ironically, offer a little more security than single DES. Using 3 keys, or sometimes 2, or K1, K3, effectively increases the key length to 112 or 168 bits, making 3DES significantly more robust against brute force attacks than single DES.
So it's stronger, but is it still used? Or did AES replace it completely?
While it's definitely slower than modern algorithms like AES, 3DES is actually still used in some sectors, particularly in the financial industry, for things like payment systems, often due to legacy system constraints and the significant cost involved in upgrading deeply embedded infrastructure. But it's definitely being phased out in favor of AES wherever possible.
Good to know it's still hanging around in some pockets. Okay, what about some other symmetric algorithms that made a mark, maybe developed outside the U.S. government sphere?
Definitely. Next up, we have the International Data Encryption Algorithm, or IDEA. IDEA. Developed in Switzerland in the early 90s, IDEA operates on 64-bit blocks similar to DES, but uses a much stronger 128-bit key. It gained significant popularity, especially in the early days of widespread internet communication, primarily because it was used in Phil Zimmermann's famous Pretty Good Privacy, or PGP, secure email package. PGP allowed individuals to easily encrypt and digitally sign their emails, and IDEA was the symmetric cipher at its heart for a long time. Then there's Blowfish, created by the renowned cryptographer Bruce Schneier, a well-respected figure in the field. Blowfish is another 64-bit block cipher, but it's notable for its variable length keys, which can range from a relatively small 32 bits all the way up to an impressive 448 bits, offering a lot of flexibility. It's often lauded for being significantly faster in software implementations than both DES and IDEA, and importantly, Schneier placed it in the public domain, no license required for its use. This really contributed to its widespread adoption in various commercial software products and security protocols like Secure Shell or SSH, connections used for secure remote logins.
I've definitely heard of Blowfish being fast and popular due to being free to use. What about government-developed algorithms beyond DES? Did the U.S. government try anything else? Maybe something that stirred up a bit more controversy than DES?
Well, they certainly did. In the mid-90s, the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, developed Skipjack, Skipjack. It uses an 80-bit key and operates on 64-bit blocks. Skipjack itself might have been a decent algorithm, but it gained significant notoriety, really infamy, due to its association with the hugely controversial escrowed encryption standard, or EES, and the physical implementation of this, of the infamous Clipper chip.
The Clipper chip, I remember hearing about that. What was the controversy?
The idea behind EES and the Clipper chip was to embed the Skipjack algorithm in hardware, like phones and computers, but design it in such a way that the government, specifically law enforcement, could obtain the unique device decryption keys under court order. Essentially, it was building a backdoor or key escrow system directly into the encryption standard. This initiative sparked widespread public mistrust, huge privacy concerns, and fierce debate within the tech community about privacy versus national security needs. Ultimately, the lack of trust and strong opposition led to very limited adoption of Skipjack outside of U.S. government applications. It's a classic case study in the tension between strong encryption for citizens and businesses and government desires for lawful access.
Yeah, a classic example of that tension, and a powerful lesson in why public trust is so vital for security technologies. Okay, what about the RC family of ciphers? I see RC4, RC5, and RC6 listed in the source. Are they related?
The Rivest ciphers, or RC family, were developed by Ron Rivest. Yes, they are in RSA, another giant in the field. However, they aren't all directly related in terms of design. RC4 is actually a stream cipher, unlike most of the others we've discussed, which are block ciphers. Developed back in 1987, it famously uses variable length keys, typically from 40 bits up to a very large 2048 bits. RC4 was incredibly widely adopted for many years. It was used in crucial protocols like WEP, Word Equivalent Privacy, and the first version of WPA, Wi-Fi Protected Access, for early Wi-Fi security. It was also heavily used in SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, and early TLS, Transport Layer Security, for securing web traffic, HTTPS.
Wow, so it was everywhere. Is it still considered good?
No, absolutely not. Unfortunately, RC4 is now considered fundamentally insecure for most modern uses. Various cryptographic vulnerabilities and weaknesses have been discovered over the years, making it susceptible to practical attacks that can recover plaintext relatively easily in some scenarios. Its widespread deprecation is a really strong reminder that even algorithms used for decades could eventually become insecure as cryptanalysis techniques improve. Now, RC5 is a block cipher, and it's important to note it's conceptually distinct and not directly related to RC4's design. RC5 is interesting because it supports flexible variable block sizes. You could choose 32, 64, or 128 bits, and highly versatile key sizes, ranging theoretically from 0 all the way up to a massive 2040 bits. And RC6 is basically the successor to RC5. It was developed specifically by Rivest and his colleagues as candidate for the big Advanced Encryption Standard, AES competition that NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, ran to replace the ES. RT6 is a 128-bit block cipher, fixing the block size unlike RC5, and supports the standard AES key sizes of 128, 192, or 256 bits. It was a strong contender in the AES competition, performed very well, but ultimately wasn't the winner.
And speaking of AES, that was the winner, right? That's the current gold standard, the one pretty much everyone relies on now for symmetric encryption.
Absolutely. The Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, it's the current U.S. government standard, officially chosen in 2000 after that extensive public competition to replace the aging DES. AES is based on the Rijndael algorithm, pronounced roughly Rijndael, which was developed by two brilliant Belgian cryptographers, Joan Damon and Vincent Rijman. AES is a 128-bit block cipher, and it's designed to support 3 different key lengths, giving users flexibility based on their security needs: 128 bits, 192 bits, and 256 bits. The internal workings are complex, involving multiple rounds of substitution, row shifting, column mixing, and adding key material. The number of rounds depends on the key length. 128-bit keys use 10 rounds, 192-bit keys use 12 rounds, and 256-bit keys use 14 rounds.
More rounds for longer keys makes sense for more security.
Exactly. AES is incredibly strong. has held up extremely well against cryptanalysis for over 2 decades, is remarkably efficient in both hardware and software implementations, and is by far the most widely used and trusted symmetric encryption algorithm today across the globe. If you're using encryption for almost anything modern, from file encryption to secure web connections, TLS 1.3 relies heavily on it. Chances are very high that AES is working under the hood. It's the undeniable gold standard.
Okay, AES is king. Any other notable symmetric algorithms we should quickly mention before we move on to managing those crucial keys?
Yes, just briefly, the Cassis algorithms are another important family of symmetric block ciphers worth knowing, named after their creators, Carlisle Adams and Stafford Tavares. Castle 128 uses 64-bit blocks like DES and IDEA, with variable key sizes, typically between 40 and 128 bits. It was known for being quite resilient. CAS 256 is the more advanced version, and like RC6, it was also designed as a candidate for the AES competition. It uses 128-bit blocks like AES and supports keys up to 256 bits. Another strong contender that ultimately didn't win the AES crown, but is still a solid algorithm. So just to give you a quick comparative sense, looking at table 6.9 in the source, for instance, you have AES, the current standard, with its 128-bit block and 128, 922, 36-bit keys. Compare that to historic DS with its 64-bit block and only 56-bit key. Or 3DS, still using 64-bit blocks but boosting the effective key to 121, 168 bits. Then algorithms like Blowfish and IDEA, both using 64-bit blocks but with much larger key sizes than DES 128-bit for IDEA and that flexible range up to 448 bits for Blowfish. Each represents a different design philosophy and trade-offs in speed, security, and flexibility from its era.
This has been a fantastic deep dive into the algorithms themselves, the nuts and bolts. But as we kind of touched on earlier, it's not just about choosing the right algorithm like AES, it's also about managing the keys themselves, which you could argue is even more critical in practice. I mean, if you have the strongest lock in the world, AES 256, but you leave the key under the doormat, well, you're not secure at all.
That's an excellent point, and it leads us directly into the often overlooked but utterly critical area of symmetric key management. Honestly, one of the biggest and most persistent challenges, the Achilles heel, if you will, for symmetric key cryptography, has always been key distribution.
Yeah.
How do you securely get that single shared secret key to all the authorized users who need it, especially when they might be geographically dispersed, without it being intercepted or compromised by an adversary along the way? This is a fundamental logistics problem that doesn't exist in the same way for asymmetric crypto.
So how do they typically distribute symmetric keys in a secure way? I imagine just, emailing the key file in the clear is an absolute no-go.
Oh, absolutely not. That would completely defeat the entire purpose of using encryption in the first place. One method, though it's largely impractical for widespread use today, is offline distribution. This is the most technically simple approach. You physically transmit the key. Think of it like literally handing over the physical key to a safe. Maybe put it on a USB drive, deliver it via a trusted courier, write it down on paper, or even communicate it verbally in a secure setting.
The old spy movie trope of passing a briefcase?
Kind of like that, yeah. While it completely avoids network interception, it's highly inconvenient, very slow, carries significant risks of interception or loss during that physical transit, and becomes completely unmanageable for large-scale deployments or users in different cities or countries. It's generally reserved for very high security, low-volume scenarios, like initializing root keys.
Okay, so if physically handing it over isn't practical for modern scale, what's the secure digital way to distribute a symmetric key without exposing it during transit?
The most common, most elegant, and generally most secure method used today involves leveraging public key encryption to create what's called a hybrid cryptography system. Now, this doesn't mean you encrypt all your bulk data with public key cryptography. Asymmetric algorithms like RSA are generally much, much slower than symmetric ones like AES, making them unsuitable for encrypting large amounts of data directly. Instead, you use the unique properties of asymmetric encryption, the public and private key pairs, solely to securely exchange the symmetric secret key, sometimes called a session key. Imagine you want to have a secure encrypted conversation with someone using fast AES encryption. First, you use an asymmetric key exchange algorithm, like the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. This allows you and the other party to securely agree on a shared secret symmetric key, even over an insecure channel, without ever transmitting the key itself directly. It's a quite clever math.
So Diffie-Hellman lets you create the shared secret without sending it.
Exactly. Once you've used Diffie-Hellman or similar public key methods like encrypting the symmetric key with the recipient's public RSA key to establish that shared symmetric key, you then use that key with a fast symmetric algorithm like AES to encrypt the actual bulk communication or data transfer. It's like using a very secure, albeit slow, method, asymmetric crypto, to safely deliver the combination to a high-speed vault, the symmetric key, which then protects all your valuables, the bulk data. This approach gives you the best of both worlds: the secure key distribution of asymmetric cryptography and the high-speed of symmetric cryptography for the actual data.
So asymmetric methods handle the initial secure handshake and key agreement, and then the fast symmetric key takes over for the heavy lifting of the actual communication. That's really efficient. Okay, once we have these symmetric keys, how do we store them safely? And just as importantly, how do we destroy them securely when they're no longer needed or potentially compromised? What are the best practices for that whole key lifecycle management?
That's just as vital as the distribution, absolutely. The number one crucial rule for storage and destruction of symmetric keys is never, ever store an encryption key on the same system where the encrypted data resides. This is precisely your key under the doormat analogy. If an attacker compromises that system, they get both the locked data and the key to unlock it. Game over. The key must be physically or logically separated from the data it protects. For highly sensitive keys, we often revisit that concept of split knowledge we discussed earlier. This involves dividing the key into multiple parts or shares and distributing those shares among two or more individuals or secure systems.
Like needing two people to turn their keys at the same time in movies?
Exactly like that. Maybe half the key goes to one security officer, the other half to another. No single person can reconstruct or use the full key alone, significantly increasing security against insider threats or a single point of compromise. Now, when considering key storage methods, you generally have three main options with vastly different levels of security. First, software-based storage. This means storing keys as digital objects within the file system, perhaps encrypted themselves by another key wrapping. It's generally considered the least secure option because it's vulnerable to software exploits, malware, or operating system compromises that could potentially expose the keys.
Easier to implement, maybe, but riskier.
Exactly. Second, and much more secure, is hardware-based storage, specifically using hardware security modules, or HSMs. These are dedicated, tamper-resistant, and often tamper-evident or even tamper-responsive physical devices designed specifically to securely generate, manage, store, and perform cryptographic operations with keys inside the hardware boundary. Keys ideally never leave the HSM in plaintext form. Think of them like specialized hardened vaults built just for cryptographic keys, offering much stronger protection against both physical tampering and logical attacks compared to software storage.
So the keys live inside this secure box.
Right. And third, leveraging the cloud. We have cloud-based storage. Many major cloud providers like Amazon Web Services, AWS, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud Platform, TCP, now offer HSM solutions as a managed service. Example, AWS Cloud HSM, Azure Dedicated HSM. This allows organizations to get the robust security benefits of hardware-based key management within a scalable, globally distributed cloud environment, often without needing to purchase, manage, and maintain the physical HSM hardware themselves.
That brings up another interesting and sometimes controversial topic: key escrow. I know this has been debated quite a bit historically, especially with things like the Clipper chip. What exactly is key escrow, and why is it used for better or perhaps for worse?
Key escrow is the practice of having a trusted third party hold a copy of an encryption key or components needed to reconstruct it. Now, the reasons for doing this can be perfectly legitimate and beneficial within an organization. For example, it provides a mechanism for the organization to recover encrypted data if the original key is lost. Maybe an employee leaves or a hard drive fails. It ensures business continuity and prevents potentially catastrophic data loss. It can also be used for internal auditing or compliance purposes.
So a backup plan for lost keys within a company.
Essentially, yes. However, key escrow becomes highly controversial when it's discussed in the context of government access or surveillance. Historically, as we mentioned, the Clipper chip initiative in the 1990s and the associated escrowed encryption standard, EES, were attempts by the U.S. government to mandate a form of key escrow. The idea was to allow law enforcement agencies, under strict legal authorization, like a court order, to obtain the necessary key components from trusted third-party escrow agents to decrypt communications. This approach, sometimes called fair crypto systems, where keys might be split and held by independent parties, led to significant public mistrust, fierce debate about privacy rights versus law enforcement needs, and ultimately, the initiative failed due to lack of public and industry support. It's a stark reminder of the incredibly delicate balance between legitimate security and recovery needs and the potential for misuse or erosion of privacy if government access is built into encryption systems.
Yeah, definitely a double-edged sword. Potentially useful for recovery within trusted bounds, but very concerning when mandated for external access. Who typically handles legitimate key recovery within an organization? Is there a specific role for that?
Yes, key recovery for legitimate internal purposes is typically handled by designated key recovery agents, or RAs. RAs. These are specific individuals or sometimes automated systems explicitly authorized within the organization's security policy to recover encryption keys under predefined audited circumstances. They often operate under strict controls and critically frequently employ that M of N control principle we discussed earlier, related to split knowledge. This ensures that a minimum number of authorized agents, say M out of a total pool of N agents, must cooperate and combine their shares or approvals to reconstruct or release a key.
So again, no single person has the power.
Exactly. It prevents any single agent from having unilateral access to sensitive keys and provides an additional layer of security, accountability, and process integrity. For example, in a highly sensitive system, maybe 3 out of 5 designated recovery agents might need to provide their unique credentials or approvals to collectively authorize and retrieve an encryption key for data recovery.
This all sounds incredibly complex to manage over the long term, especially with technology changing so fast. Moore's law driving computing power, new cryptanalysis techniques emerging. Do cryptographic systems like the algorithms and key lengths we choose today have a built-in lifespan? Is there an expiration date on their security?
They absolutely do. This leads us to the final, but critically important, concept of the cryptographic lifecycle. With the singular theoretical exception of the perfectly implemented one-time pad, all practical cryptographic systems have a limited useful lifespan. This is fundamentally driven by two relentless forces. Moore's law, which predicts the ongoing exponential growth in computing power, making brute force attacks cheaper and faster over time, and continuous advancements in cryptanalysis, finding cleverer mathematical ways to attack algorithms. What was considered computationally infeasible to crack yesterday might become practically breakable tomorrow or in a few years. This means security isn't a set-it-and-forget-it state. It's a continuous dynamic intellectual arms race, where today's unbreakable algorithm is just an inevitable target for tomorrow's faster computers and smarter attacks.
So security isn't static, it degrades over time if you don't keep up. What does that mean for security professionals managing these systems?
It means they must actively manage the cryptographic lifecycle within their organizations. This isn't optional, it's essential. This involves several key activities. First, specifying acceptable algorithms. Regularly reviewing and defining which encryption algorithms are considered strong enough for current use, e.g. mandating AES, perhaps phasing out 3DES, and which are deprecated, like DES or RC4. Second, identifying appropriate key lengths. Determining the minimum acceptable key lengths based on the sensitivity of the data being protected and its required longevity, e.g. requiring AES 128 for general use, but maybe AES 256 for top-secret data that needs protection for 30-plus years. Third, enumerating secure transaction protocols, ensuring that only strong modern protocols are used for communication, like mandating transport layer security, TLS version 1.2, or preferably 1.3, and configuring them to use only strong cipher suites, combinations of algorithms. The need to continuously assess, update, and eventually replace cryptographic solutions is paramount. Organizations need policies and processes for cryptographic agility, the ability to migrate away from weakening standards to stronger ones before it's too late. Staying ahead of the curve is key to ensuring long-term digital security.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken today, covering so much ground in the world of cryptography. We started right at the beginning, understanding those fundamental goals: confidentiality, integrity, authentication, and non-repudiation, essentially. Your secure digital toolbox, the four legs holding up the table of trust online. We saw how these pillars are absolutely essential for everything, from private emails to secure banking. Then we built up from the absolute basics, exploring core concepts like plaintext and ciphertext, the critical role of keys, and that mind-bogglingly huge key space, those vast numbers making brute force attacks so difficult. And we hit on the foundational wisdom of Kerckhoffs' principle. The algorithm can be public knowledge, but the key, that must remain an absolute secret. We even took a deep dive into the underlying mathematics, which was surprisingly accessible, seeing how simple Boolean operations, especially that elegant and reversible XOR function and the wraparound magic of the modulo function, are the silent, tireless workhorses of encryption. Plus, we touched on those really fascinating, almost sci-fi ideas like one-way functions easy one way, hard the other, and zero-knowledge proofs, proving you know something without revealing it, and practical concepts too, like nonces, adding randomness, and split knowledge for robust key control. Then we explored the actual techniques, the ciphers themselves. From the simple character shifts of the ancient Caesar cipher and the more complex multi-alphabet Vigenère cipher to the theoretically perfect security of one-time pads, if you follow those strict rules. We also clearly differentiated between block ciphers processing data in chunks and stream ciphers handling it bit by bit, understanding how they're both powered by those essential properties of confusion, hiding the key relationship, and diffusion, spreading the plaintext influence to make them strong against attack. And finally, we looked at the real-world evolution of the symmetric algorithms we actually use. From the historic data encryption standard, DES, and its stronger successor, triple DES, or 3DES, right up to the current undisputed champion, the advanced encryption standard, AES. And crucially, we wrapped up by covering how we manage the very heart of these systems, the keys themselves. From the inherent challenge of secure key distribution to safe storage methods like hardware security modules, HSMs, and even those complex and sometimes controversial topics like key escrow, key recovery agents, and the absolutely vital ongoing need to proactively manage the entire cryptographic lifecycle as technology inevitably marches forward. It's been a really comprehensive look.
It really has. And what's truly fascinating here, and maybe the key thing I hope you take away from all this, is that cryptography isn't some static field where we found the perfect answer decades ago. It's a constant dynamic arms race. It's this ongoing intellectual challenge between those building the secure systems and those trying to break them. This deep dive into just symmetric key algorithms really shows us that true lasting security isn't just about picking a strong lock, like AES. It's about deeply understanding that lock's intricate design, knowing how it should be used correctly, figuring out how its key must be generated, distributed, stored, and eventually destroyed, and even having the foresight to know when that currently strong lock needs to be replaced because the world has moved on, computing power has increased, or new attacks have emerged. And this raises a really important question for all of us looking forward.
As technology continues its relentless advance, with potentially game-changing disruptions like practical quantum computing maybe looming on the horizon, which could break much of today's public key crypto. What new challenges and opportunities do you foresee in securing our increasingly digital world? And how will our understanding and application of these core cryptographic principles, the ideas of confidentiality, integrity, authentication, diffusion, how will they continue to evolve to meet those future challenges? The fundamental concepts we discussed today will likely remain relevant, but the specific algorithms and the way we implement them will undoubtedly continue to transform in ways we can probably only begin to imagine right now. It requires constant learning and adaptation.
That's a powerful thought to leave you with, one that truly underscores the dynamic, ever-evolving nature of cybersecurity and the ongoing, endless pursuit of secure communication in our digital age. We sincerely hope this deep dive has given you a clear, comprehensive, and maybe even inspiring understanding of cryptography and symmetric key algorithms. Thank you so much for joining us on the deep dives. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning,